no, the short bus is coming for you. Very picky about the underwear we would wear. Write me a 3,000 word essay. Get ready with me while I tell you about the worst job I've ever had. This story starts back when I was in high school. I was homeschooled and went to a technical high school. So instead of taking electives, I went to a school to learn dentistry. It was a 4-year program, so freshman to senior year. And in your senior year, you had the option to do co-op. Co-op is where you were able to actually go out and get a job. You would go to your regular classes in the morning and then your job in the afternoon. So the summer of my junior into my senior year, I started working at a dental office. I hated this job so much. I was sterilizing instruments when a friend from my dental class messaged me. She graduated the year prior and was already working full-time for an orthodontist and messaged me saying that her orthodontist was hiring. In this message, she told me that I would be making $20 an hour and the doctor would pay me $100 just to take an interview. Being a broke 17-year-old, I said, I will be coming in. So I went in for my interview and it was 3.5 hours long. The interview consisted of me taking like a math and English test, and there were already red flags with that because apparently I failed the test. The doctor came in and said, oh no, the short bus is coming for you. Which I of course thought was weird, but he was really old, so I just kind of assumed that that was just old people humor and I kind of brushed it off. Moving forward, I ended up getting offered the job and started. After starting this job, I already noticed that like I might not be in love with it. The girls were not nice and there were just a lot of weird things happening. Let me explain to you what our uniforms looked like. We didn't wear what you would normally see at a dental or orthodontic office, being scrubs. We would wear button-down Land's End shirts with white pants, but that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was what we had to wear under our clothing. The doctor was very picky about the underwear we would wear because we were wearing white pants. If you were wearing a thong that was like colorful, you would be able to see it when you bent over. So we had to wear white granny panties, and if you would bend over and there were no white lines showing, the doctor wouldn't approach you, but he would send his little minion that worked there for like decades to come and tell you, which is really weird. And then we had to wear a knee-high sock and an ankle sock. I didn't think this was weird just because if you were to cross your legs, your pants would ride up, and he didn't want that skin in between your sock and your pant leg to show. So the knee-high socks were really just there to make sure that none of your leg skin was showing because that would be inappropriate. He just wanted you to be covered up, so I totally understand that. But I forgot to mention that when I started, I definitely noticed that he would lean towards hiring specific looking women, young, white, and blonde. Another thing was that he gave me a free Audi to drive. He had a few of these Audis that had his logo on the side of it, and I personally thought that if you had an ugly car in the parking lot, he would want you to drive an Audi so that there were only nice cars in the parking lot. I was 17, didn't really have any money, so my car was not the nicest. And he approached me and asked if I wanted to drive one of his vehicles. And of course I said yes. He gave me a free gas card so I didn't have to put miles on my own car or pay for gas. So to summarize, I'm making over $20 an hour. I get a free car and a free gas card. This seems like the best place ever. After working there for a couple of months, my identical twin sister started working, which I was so happy about. As I mentioned before, these girls at the office were just not nice. They weren't directly mean to your face. It was kind of like indirect. They would be making plans to hang out and not invite you. They would be talking about things and not include you in the conversation. Just typical petty girl stuff. And these were the girls I was working with every single day for 10 hours, 4 days a week. So it was just really weird. So I was happy that my sister would be there and I would be able to talk and hang out with her. Another thing that you should know about the office was how it was set up. There were 2 doctors, the father and the son, and both of them had 2 offices. So the business as a whole had 4 offices. And once a month, the son's team would come over to the dad's side and we would have what we call a full staff day, both staffs in one office. I liked these days because I got to see the girls that I didn't get to see on a day-to-day basis and like catch up and get to know them. But there was one thing that would happen every time. They would tell horror stories about the son, and I honestly didn't really believe them. The things they were saying was just so out of pocket. I thought it had to be fake. Anyways, a couple months go by and the dad approaches me and asks if I want to be moved over to the son side. And I had a feeling this would be happening because almost an entire staff that was working for the son had quit because he was horrible. I told the dad that I was reluctant to be moved over there because I liked my job and I knew if I was moved, I would be quitting. He assured me that that would not be happening, so I was moved. Very quickly after being moved over to the son's office, I realized that all of those horrible stories the girls were telling me were true. If you had a bad aura, he would walk around the office and sage you. He would laser patients' gums without numbing. He didn't believe in furniture and thought we should all eat food on the floor. He also didn't believe in eating food. He thought it was strange that we wanted to take a lunch break. And he would drink shroom tea throughout the day. Really, really weird stuff. At this point, I was still a orthodontic technician. I got my certification, so now I was making like $25 an hour at 18. Mind you, still driving the free car and free gas card. And I was moved to being a treatment coordinator, the person that you see when you get sold treatment. I didn't like this position because I had to work a little bit more closely with the son, and he was scary. I have to tell you guys how this guy looked. He would pull all of his hair back into a man bun. His beard would be in a braid. He had black rimmed glasses with yellow lenses, printed shirts, short pants, crazy socks and Vans. He did not look like a doctor. It actually happened a few times while I was working there that parents thought he was a stranger in the office if it was like their first appointment, not realizing that it was the doctor. He didn't look like a doctor. Anyways, I was trying to tough it out with being a treatment coordinator and weird things just kept happening. One time I was waiting for a patient and I went and knocked in his office and I heard him say, "Come in." So I went in, and this was probably the strangest thing I saw at the office. Mind you, I've already been saged a few times. When I walked in his office, he had this hanging pendulum in his hand. It was like a globe with 3 chains, and then there was a disc down here, and he had a plate on it that was on fire, and he was swinging it around like this in his office, and he looked at me like this. I was so scared, obviously, and I just told him I had a patient and that I'll be outside waiting for him. My tipping point was when I was asked to move from treatment coordinating to being at the front desk. I went to a technical dental class for 4 years learning technical skills, not front desk skills. So I wanted change. I'm dyslexic, so I approached him in his office with my letter of concern in my left pocket and my letter of resignation in my right pocket. Letter left, resignation right. I walked in and basically asked if I could be moved back to being a chairside, which he said no. And I pulled out my letter of concern and basically said, I just have some concerns about this. I don't want to be at the front desk. I would just thrive better being at a technical position in the back. And he basically said, "How dare you waste your time on the clock writing this letter?" I said, whoa, never said that. I wrote this at home. He said, "Then how dare you spend your free time writing this letter?" I said, "Doctor, with all due respect, this is my free time. I'm gonna write a letter if I want to." He didn't read it and give it back to me. So then at that point, I pulled out my letter of resignation and said, "You don't care what I have to say, so I'm resigning. 2 weeks from today will be my last day." And he realized how serious I was, so he gave it back and said, whoa, like, let's just have a meeting about this another time. I remember that I was moved back to treatment coordinating for a little bit, in which I approached him again saying, "I'm not happy with this." And he looked at me and said, "Your 4 years of dental training was such a waste of time. It is not important. You need to let it go. You are a treatment coordinator now." Of course, when someone's telling you that the time you've invested in your education is worthless, I start to cry. And he corners me as I'm leaving the office in the office car and basically says, "Look how lucky you are to have this car. You better watch yourself," basically. This was nothing new. I wasn't surprised by this interaction, whatever. A couple weeks go by and I am still super unhappy, but I really didn't think anything was going to change because that's exactly what I was being told. But this was my final straw. I was finishing up for the day. I was the last girl at work. I was leaving and packing up my stuff. Every other Thursday, the son's staff would end at 2 p.m. and the dad's staff would end at 5. So us girls on the son's side would drive to the dad's office just to finish up if we had any emails or anything else to do. I was the last girl in the office this day, and when I went to leave, already clocked out, had all my stuff in hand, the son ran up and blocked the door as I was leaving. And I said, "Oh, hey, doctor, I'm just heading out. I'm going to your dad's office." And he said to me, "Did you write your patient letters?" We had to write these letters to patients every week, basically explaining how happy we were to see them, those kind of things. I was working at the front desk still at this point, so I said to him, "No, I didn't write a letter. I think it's weird if I write a letter to someone saying, 'Hi, I'm so happy I got to check you in this week.' If I got that letter, I would be like, what the heck?" He said to me, "No, you still have to write them." And I said, "Okay, I will write them when I get to your dad's office." He said, "No, you're not. You're lying to me. You are going to go back into the records room right now and write your letters." 18 years old, alone in a big office with a man. I said, "Okay." I went back there, did not clock back in because the clock-in station was like near where he was. And I sat back there for an hour unpaid writing letters to patients saying how happy I was to check them in. So stupid. I'm already so flustered. I grab my stuff and I finally leave and go to the dad's office, and I asked to meet with him in his office, like in his personal office. And I sit down with him and I say, "Time has come where I want to quit. I told you this was going to happen. You told me that it wouldn't, and look where we are now." I said, "I love this office. I like the money I make. I like the car I drive. I like you as a person, but your son's horrible and I cannot keep doing this." I brought a piece of paper in there with me that outlined all of the reasons why I wanted to quit so that he couldn't make me look crazy. Some of them being that the son asked me to walk clockwise instead of counterclockwise, and the office was in a circle, so that just threw me off. He was withholding my Christmas bonus, the fact that he cornered me before I came here, the way he would speak to me, saging me, judging me, just all those things. I was talking to a robot. He would not stop saying, "You need to talk to my son about this. You need to talk to my son about this. You need to talk to him about this," which is exactly what I did. Oh my gosh, I just said his name. I basically called the doctor, the son, and asked if now was a good time to chat, which he responded no. Said he would call me back in 20 minutes. He called me back just as I was pulling up to my driveway and basically asked me what was up. "I'm still really unhappy working for you. I want to be moved back to my original position of being a chairside, what I was hired to do." He proceeds to say, okay, I hear you." And then this man says to me, "Go ahead and write me a 3,000 word essay as to why I should move you back to that position." I was flabbergasted. I said, that's not gonna happen. You can take this as my verbal resignation. He said to me, okay, put it in writing in an email and CC me. And then we hung up. I never spoke to him again. I returned the car to the dad's house. I had no idea what I was going to do at that point, but I had never felt more free. I started college, which I quickly found out was just not my path. So I withdrew from college, and at that point, I got a DM from another girl asking if I wanted to work for her orthodontist. I know I should have gotten some red flags like, Brooke, the last time this happened, you started working for the worst people ever. But God was telling me that this situation would play out differently, and it did just that. The craziest part was that all of the girls that had quit this first doctor's office had gone and started working for this new doctor. So all of these girls knew all of the horror stories and totally understood where I was coming from, and they were nice people. But that is the story of the worst job I have ever had. Thanks for listening to me rant for forever. A few things I forgot to mention was that there was one incident after I left where the son punched the dad in the face and actually got fired, but he has since been rehired, and to my knowledge is still working at the office. Love you.